Afternoon, everybody. Just a little bit earlier today, had a chance to get with Frank Vogel upstairs in a meeting, and just want to thank him for 3 really strong years as the head of our basketball coaching department. We expressed gratitude for the 3 years of being able to work together with a capacity of trust and collective mindset and collaboration, and just let them know that it was a point in the Lakers' history where we felt like it was time for a change in our leadership voice, and those are difficult things to do. And but Frank was grateful for the opportunity he had, and we had a conversation about how this is just an inflection point where he goes from being the leader of the Lakers to part of our legacy, and especially our championship legacy. So I would characterize it as a very open and honest meeting, and was thankful for the time with him, and just wanted to start today with expressing our gratitude to him, to his family for their 3 years of service here. Frank's a great man and a great coach, and will go on to do great things. And we're very thankful that we had 3 seasons with him as a part of everything we do.
Rob, just wanted to see how you saw that in the context of the whole season, and obviously being disappointing in many different ways, and what part of your thought process included that with Frank, and how that fits into what your plans are in the offseason.
Listen, this was a disappointing Lakers season at every level, and I think in the face of disappointment, our fans expect more, and that's at every facet. It starts with the front office, led by me, and our ability to construct the right roster. It starts with the coaches holding players accountable and making sure that there's on-court execution. It goes to our training staff doing everything they can to make sure we have healthy bodies on the court. And it goes to our players to play at with on-court execution at the highest level, because that's what Lakers fans expect and deserve from all of us. And so I think when you have disappointment, you need to take ownership of that, and you need to vow to make the adjustments to be better. And that's where the work starts today. We have exit interviews with every player, so we'll get a chance to get their thoughts, and really reflect on ways that we can be better across the board, because that's what Lakers fans expect here. They expect championship level basketball every season. We know that, and we want to deliver that to our fans, and the work to do that for next season starts now. We've been in this place before. We know what it takes to put in the work to fix it, and that's where our energy and time will be spent over the coming days.
Dave?
Yeah, Rob, so speaking of the accountability piece, Frank Vogel didn't put together the roster. Frank Vogel couldn't control injuries. Frank Vogel did lead this team to a championship 18 months ago. Why the decision to have him be the first major change in trying to get back to the championship track?
Dave, I think today's not going to be a day of like finger pointing or unwinding all the specific reasons. We just felt organizationally at the highest level it was time for a new voice. And those decisions are made at the very top level in a collaborative way by our basketball operations department, and ultimately with Jeannie and Tim and the leaders of our organization. We just felt like it was time for a new voice. And that's not to say anything against the incredible accomplishments that Frank Vogel's had. He was a great coach here, and he's going to go on to be a great coach somewhere else. We just felt like it was time for a new leader, and that's why we made the decision today that we did.
BT?
Rob, when you guys go through this process of looking for another coach, what are the characteristics you guys have been looking for, and how much autonomy will they have in hiring their own staff?
It's a good question, BT, and I think, in answering that, I want to make sure that no part of that is a knock or disparagement towards Frank, because every coaching candidate is unique with their skill set. So this is not an analysis of him whatsoever, and I want to be clear on that. But in terms of what this team needs right now, we feel like with obviously superstars on our team, we want a strong voice that's able to inspire the players to play at the highest level of competition every night. And I think that's going to be one of the resounding qualities that we look for in terms of holding everybody from the top player on our team to the 15th man to a degree of accountability. And that's going to be one of the many characteristics I think that jumps out today.
Bill?
Rob, was Jeannie part of the meeting this morning with Frank? And over the last 14 hours, obviously it was reported that the decision had been made to let Frank go, and then you don't have that conversation with him until this morning. What was Jeannie's reaction to sort of the way those, I think about 13 hours transpire between that report and when you guys actually had that conversation?
First of all, the basketball decisions made here are made by the basketball operations department, and so I take full responsibility for any decision that's been made. In terms of media reports that are speculative and unsourced, we don't spend any of our time reacting to that type of information in terms of how we make decisions here.
As a follow-up, had the decision been made last night? Was that when that report came out? Are you saying that was inaccurate, or had the decision been made when that came out?
What I said is we don't respond to unsourced media reports, and in terms of the timing of our decision, I'm going to keep that internal.
Dylan?
Don't isn't it kind of embarrassing though, the fact that, this was kind of out there. That is, in theory, how he learned about the fact that he was losing his job. I think a lot of people kind of looking at this from the outside are thinking, right, whatever you think of the job that he did, that he deserved, to kind of hear it first from you, right, rather than hear about it on Twitter.
He factually heard about our decision in an in-person meeting for me this morning.
Brett?
Rob, when you look towards the coaching search, do you think it'll be a long process, relatively short process? And what are you looking for in the next Laker coach?
Brez, I think it's going to be a very methodical process, and I think the principles here are not to pick an end date and say, hey, we have to have someone by this date. I think we want to find the right person. That's the most important thing. I think all things considered, it would be great to have someone in place by the draft, but our process will be thorough and methodical. And we haven't even begun to put together a list or discuss who the replacement is. We wanted to make a commitment to finishing the season strong last night, which we were able to do, and not skip steps and kind of turn to those decisions once the season was over, starting today.
Hi.
You mentioned, accountability in your role in building the roster, and looking back on this season, do you think that the roster catered enough to the strengths of Frank Vogel?
I think our roster did not work. We did not have the season that our fans expect, and we have to fix those things. And I think one of the things that we've done and will do as we look to hiring a new coach is to include that coach in the process of how to make a roster work together. And I think in terms of the future decisions that we have to make about our roster, some of those will come once we pick our coach, which will clearly be before free agency in July. But there has to be a strong alignment between coach and GM in terms of roster decisions. And that said, I don't think every time you make a roster decision, you're going to make a perfect one or have no mistakes. That's just part of making choices. But there will be a strong sense of collaboration with our future roster decisions, as there was with Frank and his tenure here.
Johan?
Rob, in terms of next season and kind of building out the next roster, what have you kind of learned over the last 3 years of kind
kind of building rosters around Ron and AD and kind of what's worked and what hasn't, and sort of what needs you guys have going to next season?
Listen, I think first, LeBron James is a player that's on the Mount Rushmore of basketball. And every season of his 19 so far has to be looked at as a precious commodity. And we need to do all we can to be caretakers of his legacy and to try to build the best team we can around him. And that's something that we had the objective for that last year. And obviously this roster did not work. But there's a great level of trust in our collaboration with him to make sure we get it right this summer and fix it. But building a team around LeBron and Anthony is unique. It might be different than a team laden with young players or developing players. And so that, of course, goes into the metrics of the decisions we make. But I think it's important that we're going to address some certain areas of our roster, and I don't think that today's the day to get entirely granular. We have several months to figure all those things out, but I think we have to get better on multiple fronts, and we will this summer. And I'm confident, like we did in 2019 after a year of disappointment, we put our heads together. Our basketball operations department is led by some great minds, Kurt Rambis and Joey Buss and Jesse Buss, help me make decisions. And I think we'll spend the next several weeks and months doing an autopsy of what worked well and what didn't work well this year, and come out of that with a clear plan of how to get it right in July.
Mark Medina.
Hey Rob, on the collaboration part, how would you characterize what LeBron's collaboration has been with you in the front office in the past, and what do you expect it will be moving forward?
Again, I think the important thing, Mark, is that at the end of the day, the roster decisions ultimately rest on my shoulders. And I will take input from LeBron and Anthony as our two captains. I have done that during my entire tenure. But at the end of the day, I think I'm the one who leads the basketball operations department and will take ultimate accountability for the roster decisions are made. Our dialogue with our captains is open and has been very productive. But it's important that we are seen as the ultimate decision makers, and that's the way it will go and has gone.
Dan on Zoom.
Hi, Rob. Sorry I can't be there. I have two quick ones for you. Are you concerned at all about the perception of the franchise kind of in the wake of how things were handled yesterday? I know that these are the types of things that matter when it comes to recruiting coaches, recruiting players. Is that a concern at all in your mind? And then I guess secondarily, how would you kind of characterize the balance between, like you said, each season with LeBron James is a precious commodity, but he's 37, 38 years old. You also have the responsibility of the future of the franchise, kind of balancing 3, 4, 5 years down the road when you have the ultimate sort of win now player.
I guess first, I think, the Lakers franchise is one of the most respected in all of sports across the globe. And I think that will remain to be the case, and we'll put the work behind to make sure that's the case, because again, that's what our fans expect. In terms of building a team, we don't know exactly how long LeBron will play, but of course this year he played at the highest level. An incredible year for him offensively, and he feels, in my exit meeting with him, highly motivated to return next year and have another elite level of play. I think if our team would have found a way to win more, given the year he had, he would have been in the MVP conversation. So that's the for him to play at that level in the 19th year of his career is pretty jaw-dropping, and his motivation to come back and do that again next year was palpable, in my discussions with him earlier today in his exit meeting.
Dave, you have a follow-up?
Yes, please. Rob, considering where LeBron's at in his career and the inevitable point of diminishing return at some point, obviously he's pushed past what the standard is in that department. And then also considering that in order to put a new group together, sometimes it requires patience, and the core that you put in place for this season only got to play 21 games together because of forces out of your control and it came to injuries. How do you corroborate those two things in your position, measuring whether this group deserves more time or whether you gotta make a major change?
I think the most important thing is to take the next several days and maybe weeks to take the emotions out of things and to really sit back and take a look at everything that did not go right this year. Because again, today is not about trying to spin or sugarcoat. We had a very disappointing season. And that will not be the case for us next year. In terms of rushing to judgment on the 5 things we need to fix, today's not the day to do that. But the collaboration with the front office and thinking around those things does start after today, and we will have a very measured plan to get those things fixed. And part of that will be input from the players on our roster that are here or could be back next year. We always listen to the voice of the player. And part of that will be the philosophies and the voice of the new coach that we hire in the coming weeks.
Just to be a little more direct on this,
Yeah.
The players that you've named as your captains, Anthony and LeBron, where does your highest paid player on your roster fit into that conversation, Russell Westbrook?
Russ is a Hall of Fame player that gave everything he could to this organization this year. He battled every game, and we're so appreciative of that. In terms of Russell Westbrook and his future, part of that's in his control. First things first, he has a player option. I'm sure he'll sit down with his agent and have discussions around that. And like any player, we'll partner with him after that decision is made about what's best for his future. And again, rest assured, we're going to look under every stone for ways to be better and be open to anything that will improve our team and put us in a position to compete at a higher level next year than we did this year.
Last two.
I'll just say that statement is not about any specific player on our roster. It's a general statement. I don't think it's fair today to take any player on our roster and discuss his future, whether he'll be in a trade, won't be in a trade. I don't think that's fair. But in general, the statement I made, I stand behind.
All right, last two, we'll do Mike Trudell and then the follow-up with Kyle.
Hey, Rob, LeBron had mentioned the 41 different starting lineups and how injuries and different things led to that and the difficulty building cohesion. And then on the other hand, the 19-20 roster that you build, starts 24-3. Right, so did you get a sense of just some of the things that worked basketball-wise and didn't need, aside from LeBron and AD, of course, being on the court, and just how that was a little bit different from this year, and how do you kind of think about that as you now try to move forward to this next shape of what the roster might be?
Yeah, I think basketball chemistry can be, an elusive concept that you don't always know if it's going to be there or not until you get a chance to see if players gel together. And there's so many factors that come into play on whether that will or won't happen. And this year it got played out in various ways. You bring up, the injuries to star players. We also signed, a point guard that we didn't get a single game out of, and Kendrick Nunn. But we're in a results business. We're not. It's a wins and loss business. We're not in an excuse business. So today's not about making excuses for why we didn't succeed. But I do think. A chemistry of players that are willing to work hard together and make the sacrifices needed to compete every night at a high level is a North Star and is a barometer. But the calculus for Lakers' success is pretty binary. Either we win a championship or we don't. There's no gold stars for the in-between, or there's no attaboys. And this year we did not. We failed in that mission. And that's really the way we look at things here. And to get into a position where we can be a team that competes next year at that level to try to bring our fans the 18th title is going to take a lot of focus on what you bring up, which is making sure that the chemistry of the team is healthy and that we're growing together throughout the course of a season.
Last question, Kyle.
We were talking to LeBron about, his possible contract extension. I know he and Rich can't talk to you guys right now about that, but he's also said before, I see myself playing in purple gold as long as I'm playing. Is it an important goal for the franchise to try and see LeBron retire as a Laker?
The partnership we've had first with LeBron, his representatives, has been great and just a gold standard, and we've appreciated his professionalism and directness. The amount of conversations we have over the course of the season is really meaningful, and every indication that we've received is that he sees the Lakers as his home, and the CBA, the NBA collective bargaining agreement, is very specific about what we can and can't say about player negotiations. We have to be very mindful and follow those rules. So I can't talk about his future contract status, but the feeling is that he loves being a Laker and sees this as a long-term home, and that's been made loud and clear.